Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Manning Moore.
And I am Trey Ram.
And today we're bringing you a fresh new episode of the Fresh Creatives podcast. Today we're going to talk about some accountability, a fancy new tip of the week. We got a discussion about learning and an awesome section about some new resources we have found this week. So let's go ahead and get started. Trey, show us what you have been working on.
Yeah, so for the past few months, I've been working on this recreation of the Hotel Adriano from the Studio Ghibli film Porco Rosso. It's an absolutely beautiful film. I highly recommend it. This has been a really nice project, actually. I've learned a lot of cool stuff. I think one of the most interesting things I've learned is the importance of creating small objects that you can use to create more objects. So at the start of the program, I had created these tile objects that could be placed around the world. But it was a very modular system. So you can see here, this patio was made out of all these objects, but they're all individual objects that can be placed and then merged into a singular object, which helps tremendously with performance. And this isn't something that I had ever done before, so I wasn't sure how useful it was going to be. But throughout the process, you can see that I've used them everywhere. I have them on the walls here. They're decorating the patios. They're also along these, creating a nice line. And so it's something that I'll definitely be doing in the future, as a small thing at the beginning to give a lot of flexibility at the end of the project. So I still have quite a lot to do. Yeah, I still have a few things to finish. I need to work on performance because I would like to turn this into a downloadable demo for people. And I have a few more things I need to add and clean up. But overall, I think it's going really nicely, and I'm happy with the progress so far.
Yeah, so far it looks really beautiful from my end. Well done.
Thank you.
For my accountability, this weekend I rendered out this shot. I did it in Cinema 4D, used Octane to render, and comped it in Fusion. Fusion has quickly become my favorite software to comp these renders in. I don't have Nuke because Nuke's expensive, but
it is very expensive.
But yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool going in, doing all the different passes, combining them all together. Just a bunch of color tweaking, adjustments going throughout. I work in linear because linear is, as of right now, like the best way to control light and colors if you don't have aces in your scene. So Octane doesn't truly fully support aces yet, and until they do, I'm stuck with just doing linear, and linear is fine, so it's not a huge deal. I would love for aces to pop up.
What is aces? Excuse my ignorance.
Aces is a amazing color workflow that is a huge discussion that might be done for another episode. But basically, it's a way to control all of your different camera inputs into a scene. So let's say you have a Blackmagic camera and you have a red camera. You want to bring these two cameras into the same workspace so you can control them in the exact same way, and you do that through aces. So you convert them into the aces workflow, and then you can output them into any other kind of workflow. So you can bring in your aces, your red and black magic cameras, convert them into aces, and then you can output them directly to sRGB, Rec 709, Rec 2020, all the standard broadcasting color setups.
That actually sounds super cool.
It's
basically
incredible.
A standardized color profile for video, photos, things like that.
Yeah, we use it at work because it's just awesome. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So Octane doesn't fully support aces. I think as of right now, only Arnold does. And I don't have Arnold. So basically did a whole bunch of all this stuff in Fusion, and then I wanted to do a little bit more tweaking in Photoshop, so I brought that final image in here and added a little bit of light leaking right here, noise and dust, And yeah, this is my final image.
This is really nice. I feel like maybe something on the wall in the negative space up there, or possibly kind of sitting on top of the dresser.
Yeah.
Because it's a nice render, but I feel it's missing a little bit of a story at the moment.
You know, funny enough, I did actually put like a little apple right here, but I couldn't, the color of it was so stark compared to the rest of the scene. It did not look right, so I actually just removed it. But yeah, I agree. I should have something in here or over here just to draw the eye a little bit more around the scene. Yeah.
Well, I think you're drawing the eye really nicely with the lighting, but I just feel like the scene is missing some presence.
Sure. Yeah.
But in general, it is a really nice render, and I do love the lighting here.
Mm-hmm.
Super nice, low key lighting. Really well done with the contrast and the darkness and the lights.
Thank you very much. That's so kind. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our tip of the week. I understand that you have a great tip of the week for us.
Yeah, so recently I've been doing some kind of modding for racing games and playing around with different stuff in Blender. And I found this tip where you can actually export 3D data from Google Maps. And this is super useful because it can be used as a reference, or you can create terrain or anything like that. So I'm going to very quickly show you how it works and what it looks like. And then we'll have a more detailed video on how you can actually do it and get it all set up in the description, because it can be a little bit complicated and doing a full tutorial would be outside the scope of this. So you do need a couple of programs. First, you need Blender 2.8, and then there's a plugin that you'll need to install called Google Maps Importer. The link will be in the description, and you can get it installed. Well, maybe it's not Google Maps Importer, or it's not official. That's the reason it's not showing up. And then you also want a program called RenderDoc, which basically captures the GPU data being rendered on your GPU. And this is how we actually get the program to capture the photogrammetry data from Google. So you'll need to get RenderDoc installed. And then in order to have it work, you have to sort of inject it into the program before the graphics API starts running. So to do that, we need to create a custom link to wherever you have Google installed with a few custom command lines. So this is something that will be explained more in the tutorial. But if you don't do this, you won't be able to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this custom shortcut that I created. And you'll see that it boots up to our white screen. And we have another window here. So the reason it does this is because the program is pausing the graphics API at the moment. So it's not actually rendering anything until we click OK. And the reason it's doing this is because we need this number here, so 10,800. So we need to remember that and then go back into RenderDoc. And we want to go up to File and Inject into Process. And as you can see, it has to happen after it starts, before the API has been initialized. So that's why Google Chrome is white at the moment. And here we can search for the process on our graphics card. So you could just search for Chrome, but the problem is there are many different types, so you don't know really which one you need. So we can also search by the PID number, and we see now that we have this that we just started. We go ahead and click Inject, and we'll see it says connection established, and the API says none because it hasn't been established yet. So we can go back here and click OK. And then you can see now that we've opened up Google Chrome, but up here we have some information. So this is telling us what exactly is being rendered. So once we have this, we know it's working. We can now just go to Google Maps and find some location. So I'll just do a location in Cologne, Germany. I don't know, let's do the Cologne Dome. It's a really beautiful building and would be kind of cool to recreate in 3D. So maybe we could use this as a reference. So we'll just get it loaded up, let everything load in the background. And then we'll go back to RenderDoc. And we want to do capture after delay and just set that to about 3 seconds. And then click capture and then go back into Chrome, and we want to start moving the map around. And you can see it hangs for a second. And once it's stopped hanging, make sure you move your mouse the whole time. If we go back into RenderDoc, you'll see we have a capture here. So we can double click on it, and it's got all of this data. So this means that it's worked. You generally want about 3 color passes and maybe some draw calls. So to save this, we'll just right click on it, select save, and we can put it somewhere. So you can see that I've been using this for projects already. I'll go ahead and put this into a new folder, and we'll call it podcast capture. Okay, so that's all it is. RenderDoc, we're totally done. Now we can go to Blender. We'll go ahead and delete everything as tradition. And then we'll want to go to File, Import, and once you have the plugin installed, you'll see this option here, Google Maps Capture. So we'll click that, and we'll go to wherever we had saved our files. So here, click Import. And it'll take a second depending on the size of your file, because they can get very large, especially if you're very zoomed out. So while we wait it to load, what do you think so far, Manning?
This is completely over my head. This is so cool.
It sounds very technical, but to be honest, I don't understand the technicalities of it. I just understand what buttons to press to make it work.
Sure, yeah. So you're going to do a full tutorial, kind of diving a little bit more into this process?
Yeah, I think that that's something that would be really useful. There's already a lot of great tutorials on YouTube.
Sure.
This is something that the Microsoft Flight Simulator community is actually using to import Google Maps photogrammetry into places where Bing Maps doesn't have photogrammetry, or the AI generations of buildings isn't exactly accurate.
Right, yeah. That's awesome.
It really makes for an interesting question while we wait for this, because with that, I mean, who exactly, obviously the models belong to Google, but they're able to be implemented into Microsoft Flight Simulator and then put onto the in-game marketplace. So it's kind of hard to say exactly like how you need to handle that.
Sure, yeah. There's
a lot of copyright there.
If it's Google's data.
Yeah. But if you're not selling it too, I mean, obviously if you were selling it, I think that's a very different story.
Right.
But if you're just an enthusiast and you want to put your team's favorite football stadium into the game and provide it for free, then
oh my god,
I think that should be allowed.
Oh my god.
So yeah, so now we have all of our data here. And
that's incredible. Did it bring in the texture too?
Yep. So it automatically adds all the textures. So we just switch to the material preview modes.
Oh my god.
Give it a second to load. And
that's
now you have
incredible.
full access to 3D data. And you can do this for anything. So you can do this for terrain as well, even with areas that don't have photogrammetry in them. It still works for terrain. So this is super useful, right? Let's say you wanted to like recreate this area in 3D. You can import this and then use this as references to build out your streets or anything like that.
Wow.
And it's also really cool to kind of just go down and experience Google Maps at a level that you're not able to.
Yeah. That's incredible.
So, yeah. And this is I've actually used this in production so far. In my Studio Ghibli scene, I had the problem of all my background mountains not being particularly realistic.
Yeah.
So what I did is I went to some location in the area that my scene is based on, and I found some mountains that were there, and I grabbed that data and exported it out. And then using that, I was able to sort of convert it into some maps that could be used for like terrain textures. So this would be a dirt mask. This would be grass, I believe. This would be like your trees. And this is a normal map. And so you can get really nice looking, really realistic terrain by using this technique, because you're pulling it directly from its location in the real world. Yeah. You're not trying to like recreate it. So if you need to work quickly, or the detail isn't all that important, like for background mountains, then this is a really great technique.
Wow. I remember doing something like this for a music video where the scene was based in like Machu Picchu. And so our studio, we took geodata from somewhere, and it was like high poly, but like low resolution textures. So I actually had to go in for like 4 days and retopo the whole like mountain range, including all the ruins and stuff.
Yeah,
It was crazy. Can you go back into Blender and show me the wireframe on that?
it's pretty bad.
It is.
You definitely don't want to
Oof.
use this for production.
Yeah. Oof.
But as a reference, it's really fantastic.
I mean, you could also do like some pretty sick aerial shots of this.
You could, but it's important to understand. So the way this works is it's essentially capturing squares, and this is how Google splits it up. So the further out you go, the more squares you have.
Yeah.
And I want to say, I think like 128 squares is about 150 megabytes, which can take quite a while to load. We can go ahead and take a look at the size of this in Windows Explorer to see what the weight of, or how heavy it is.
Yeah.
So this is 43 megabytes.
Wow.
So if you wanted to do a whole city, that would get very large very
chunky.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many tries are in that scene right now?
Currently we have 733,000.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not an necessarily optimized mesh.
Sure.
But if you do go further out, and you can see this in Google Maps.
Yeah.
If you do go further out, you can see that the quality gets reduced. But I have not tried it from this far out, and I really don't want to.
Yeah, that would take quite a bit. That's so cool. Well, thank you for sharing that tip of the day. I love it.
It is. Hopefully, it'll be useful someday.
Yeah. All right, now let's go ahead and dive into our main discussion for today, which is essentially don't stop learning, right?
Yeah.
So, where is this coming from? Well, let's take a look at our backgrounds. We grew up with each other. In high school, we did film together. And, I think out of all the people that did film, we probably were set apart from a lot of other people because we kept doing things on the side, right? Yep. So we would go out, Trey would write a short film, and then we would go out, the next week and film and shoot it and just keep doing that completely separate from assignments at school because we wanted to go make these films. And it was like that for just about all of high school.
Yeah, for quite a long time. I mean, I had moments where I wasn't particularly passionate about it, so it's very hard for me to do stuff. But when we were working on it, I mean, you're learning a lot, and it doesn't. I think something that I struggle with now that I'm older and I feel like life is more serious is it doesn't have to be good. Like, you don't have to be creating something amazing in order to be learning and improving. And I think that's a really important lesson to have, and something I'm constantly working on telling myself. Because if you're worried about making it really good, you're not going to learn. I mean, it's okay to produce crap. Like, eventually that crap becomes good. I mean, all of my old films are terrible, but I made them. That's the important thing. Yeah. They got made. If they didn't get made, I would never have the skills that I have today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hear professionals all the time saying the best way to learn is doing, right? The best way to get into somewhere, whatever industry, whatever it is to produce stuff, create stuff, and don't stop doing it, because you learn more from doing it, messing up, making something bad, than if you're just sitting there reading an article on what to do. So, or watching a tutorial on YouTube. It's incredibly, incredibly important to constantly be creating things. Okay. And it can, that level can fluctuate depending on, what is happening at the time. But I think it's important to have a mindset of constantly, what is this next thing that I need to learn? What is this next thing that I need to try?
Yeah, and this actually brings up something I wanted to mention is that I think when it comes to learning or improving or just getting good at anything, consistency is far more important than anything else. It does not matter how talented you are at something or how quickly you learn or anything like that. I mean, all of those things can speed up the process or make it more enjoyable or whatever. But if you consistently do it, if I do an hour of, say, language practice every day for 2 years, I'm going to be really good at that language. And it's not because I learned quickly, it's because I stuck with it. And this is something you hear all the time with professional artists. You don't learn art doing 1 hour every week. You learn art by doing 1 hour or 30 minutes a day, even. I think this is so important. I mean, I can find 30 minutes in my day to sit down and do something. I have lots of time to do that. And so I think it's important to say, I'm just going to do 30 minutes. And sometimes I do have an issue where I don't really want to work for like 3, 4, 5 hours at a time. But if you can find 30 minutes, that's all it needs. That's all it takes. And one day you'll want to do an hour or 2 hours. You don't always have to be motivated to work a long time, but you do sometimes have to force yourself to work a little bit of time.
Yeah, I think the way I got my job is probably a good testament as to why it's important to keep learning new things. So I went to John Brown University and studied filmmaking. I think they call it digital cinema. And essentially, what was great about the program is they focused on learning how to tell a story. That was their main thing. It wasn't learning how to set up a camera. It wasn't learning how to set up lights. It was learning how to tell a story, because ultimately, if you're going to be in filmmaking, it's the story that's going to be driving an audience's love or reaction to the piece. So we studied that. We studied basic filmmaking. There was nothing in there about visual effects. We had nothing on visual effects. I decided to learn visual effects on the side because no one else really was, right? You had these, people with these big ideas on, I want to put a dragon in my scene. And it's like, how do you plan on putting a dragon in your scene if you don't know how to do it? So I made it a point to learn how to do it myself, because if no one else was going to do it, I might as well make myself available to do it, because then I get on more projects. I get asked to do more things because of that. And it was through me learning how to do visual effects that I actually got the job I have now, working at a studio in visual effects, because I took the time to learn it on my own, to be the more marketed person than everyone else, because I grew my skills in all areas.
Yeah, but that's also something else. I mean, you enjoy visual effects.
Yes.
And that's another really big thing, right? I think it's a bit of a mistake to learn something purely because it's going to become a marketable skill. I think if you do that, it's going to be extremely difficult to be consistent with it. This is, again, I love studying languages, and this is something I notice in language, right? If you don't have a reason to study it, like you're not going to go live in the country, or you like don't have any friends that speak it or whatever, you're only learning it because it's cool, you're not going to stick with that long enough to actually get good at the language. And I think that's the same way in learning a skill. I mean, there has to be some enjoyment in it to want to learn it, because we are human, and I will sit down and do stuff I don't want to do if I know I need to, but I'm not going to apply myself as hard as I would as if I actually enjoy doing something. But you have to strike that balance. I think there are some things that have to be done that aren't fun at all. But you have to do them in order to set yourself up for success.
Right. Like for the longest time, I did not want to learn how to UV map anything because that's like the most annoying part about 3D. But when I started working at Mutiny, you have to, right? Like that's just part of the workflow. So it was a reluctant thing to learn, but I'm much better of a 3D artist now than when I was before, because it's a skill that I needed to do. I was reluctant to do it, but I needed to do it. And now that I have that skill, I can UV unwrap anything.
Yeah, I often ask myself, what are the things I'm not learning right now that I could be learning?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't even know that you're not learning it or that you need to learn it, right?
Yeah.
Because knowing that comes with experience. And I'm still studying at school. My experience is not particularly high. I have a lot of experience in doing my own stuff, but no industry experience. And so you're missing a bit of a perspective there that is just simply not available purely because you haven't had the time or you haven't talked to the right people or you haven't met the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, wrapping it back around, the biggest thing you can do as an artist is to keep working on your art, right? Learn new things, keep working, because you learn more by doing things than you would reading or watching tutorials.
Yep.
Now, don't get me wrong, there are definitely times where you want to do research on techniques or something like that. But once you get that research down, practice it, do it, try it. And then expand on it, right? Try new things with it, because it's only through that you're going to be able to learn.
Yeah. And that's what I love about art. I mean, art is a very knowledge application based kind of field, in that you can learn something. And me, as just kind of an average Joe, can take a technique that somebody teaches me on YouTube and modify it to use it in like a new or different way. I think there are some fields where that's not quite possible because some of the stuff you have to do is just so complicated or requires so many moving parts. But with art, you really can apply different skills together and create new or interesting things. But
I think something to take away that I have, learned to do in order to make learning better is creating goals. So, like in our studio, we had kind of a janky way of 3D tracking a scene. And so I decided, okay, I want to create a much more streamlined way of doing this. So I read the manual on Synthesize. I looked at how they do their exporting and made it better for our studio. I created that goal. I researched it. I implemented it. So goals are incredibly important in learning. So let's say, be careful with making big ones, right? So instead of saying, I want to learn Houdini, I mean, good luck. I think you should take an aspect of Houdini that you want to learn. Like, I want to learn organic transformations of objects. That's a lot more specific and streamlined, and you can absolutely search ways on how to do that, and then create your own way on doing organic transformations of objects. But like creating a specific and more smaller goals will help you in learning, because it will allow you to accomplish the goal, and that sends like awesome happy signals to your brain saying, hey, I did this, look at me, this is awesome. So let's keep making, keep creating, keep learning, and create more goals, right? So create goals, make them small, make them specific. And once you accomplish those, then you can start making bigger ones. But the goal in mind is to keep learning.
Yeah. Always, I mean, every day trying something new, or finding something new, or whatever. I mean, it creates a positive feedback cycle. And I mean, there's not much more I can add to your goals point. I think that's extremely valuable, and something that I don't know, something that I struggle with a little bit occasionally. I mean, it's easy to forget that and just do it. It's very easy to just wake up and just start working, and then you say, "Oh, I'm working, I'm getting somewhere." But that's not necessarily true if you don't have a goal, right? You're kind of working towards nothing. Goals really do help you focus in on what is important and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll cover up our discussion on learning. So let's go ahead and move into our last field for today, which is our resource roundup. This section is basically cool links, videos, images, websites that we have found that we want to share with the community. So something big that we want to talk about, I'm going to go ahead and move on to Adobe. Adobe just announced some really cool new changes to After Effects. Their 3D viewport, they've got gizmos for transformations and 3D scenes. They've got new camera tools for it, which is really cool. Let's see, hold on. EJ Abrams. I think it's EJ. Yeah, EJ Abrams did an awesome video going over the cool new transformations. We can include that in our show notes, but I highly recommend looking at it. It's like a 3-minute video talking about the new changes in After Effects, which I am hugely a fan of. We need more After Effects changes.
Yeah, I'm sure that's highly relevant to your job field.
Yeah, a little bit. All right, what did you find?
So I was looking at the Learn Squared blog, and they introduced a brand new system for feedback, which I think is cool. So they had the mentor system, but now they introduced a system where during classes you can get really detailed feedback on your work at any time you need it. So it's not tied to a specific session. And I think this is fantastic because it allows people that maybe are doing a Learn Squared course with not a lot of time on their hands to really focus on improving themselves and getting feedback from a professional, which is so valuable. Getting feedback from somebody with more experience than you is probably one of the number one ways to improve yourself as an artist. And it can sometimes be hard to find that because professionals are busy people. They often have their own jobs, and so it can take quite a while to find somebody that's willing to give you really good and detailed feedback on your work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Go learn. And if anyone doesn't know what Learn Squared is basically an online school in a way that has really awesome, very professional courses centered around certain ideas. So like concept art, sketching, UI design and animation, stuff like that. It's an incredible resource. Speaking of Learn Squared, they did just release they're about to release a new course on Unreal environments, which is really cool. So I recommend checking that out. Actually, it is released. Congratulations.
It is released.
Joe Garth, who worked on the amazing Rebirth short film, built entirely inside of Unreal. I highly recommend checking that out and looking at his course on Learn Squared because it is beautiful.
It is. I was looking at the trailer. I don't have the money to pay for it at the moment, but the trailer looks very interesting, and it's definitely something that can really improve your skills in Unreal. I already know that, and I don't even have the course. I mean, that's how highly rated all of the courses on Learn Squared are.
I think the last thing we should talk about, just real quickly, because we're just about out of time, is Blender 2.91 and 2.92 changes.
Yeah, this is really cool. I love the new cloth brush that they added. that is super fantastic. Cloth is always something that I've never really known how to model. I've been using Marvelous Designer recently, which is a fantastic program. But having that is just so fantastic. And then, but I think the coolest thing that they have now is a modifier that converts a VDB into a mesh.
Yes, that's the big one, isn't it?
It is the big one. It's probably on this underneath the modifiers tab.
Something like that, yeah.
Of this page. Under modeling, I would say. Modeling and then modifiers.
There we go. Yeah. Let's see. Subdivision curves.
We'll post a link. They have a kind of abridged release notes version on their website. We can post a link to that as well as these if you want to dig into the details of it.
Yeah.
But it's so essentially, I mean, VDB modifiers. A VDB is just like a cloud of data, of volume data. So
like
it has no
pixels.
real. Yeah, essentially. And a mesh modifier takes those pixels and it turns them into a 3D mesh that you can use. So I've seen this used in Houdini for tons of stuff.
Right, and that's like part of the awesome love that is Houdini, right? Where you can take simulations and convert their VDB data into mesh, and it's really awesome. And so I don't think any other program has that capability except now Blender, which is free.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. So I'm very excited for that. I want to try that out. You can make some really weird stuff. So I'm also excited to see like what people do. And on the flip side, you can take a mesh and convert it to a VDB and then convert that VDB back into a mesh.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a very procedural workflow, which is something that I really appreciate.
Ooh, okay. I did mess up. Cinema 4D has that kind of a workflow with their mesh builder, their volume mesh builder. It's not the exact same where you take VDB data and convert that into mesh, but it's kind of similar where you take objects, convert that into a VDB, put that in there, and then export out a final combined mesh. So it's similar, but it's not the exact same.
Gotcha.
The one that Blender and Houdini has is a lot more powerful. So yeah,
especially because you can modify the VDB to generate new meshes.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so cool.
Yeah. I love Blender. We use it at work. This is our primary modeling and rendering software, and it's amazing. It's amazing. And have it for free is even better. So
it's fantastic.
Highly recommend hopping onto that train as soon as you can because I love it and everyone at work loves it. So there we go. Okay. I think that's going to be it for our first episode. Congratulations, Trey.
Yeah.
You did your first episode.
So did you. And so did anybody that's listened this far.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
If you have, very much appreciated.
Thank you guys so much for hopping in and listening to this. This is a new project that we are very excited to start and begin. Like I said, thank you so much for joining. We are really appreciative of having this opportunity. And it's a really fun way for us to give back to so many communities that have given us so much.
Yeah. And I just enjoy talking about this stuff. I mean, it's my passion. I do it every day for hours on end. So
yeah, me too.
Being able to sit down and just kind of talk about it is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that'll be it for the first episode. Thank you guys so much for joining the Fresh Creative Podcast. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and goodbye.